All right, let's set the scene. Picture it. Edinburgh, 1724. Now, this is a city that's buzzing with new ideas, right on the edge of the Enlightenment. But down in the old Grassmarket Square, the Gallows still casts this long, dark shadow over everything. And today, we're going to talk about a woman who was scheduled to meet her end right there, but who, well, let's just say she had other plans.
So let me ask you something. Can you actually survive your own death sentence? I mean, it sounds completely impossible, doesn't it? But that is the absolute heart of the story we're diving into today. It's all about a woman named Maggie Dickson, who, as it turns out, was just terrible at following schedules, especially when it came to her own execution.
So who exactly was Maggie Dickson? Well, she was a fish hawker, basically a fish seller, from a town called Musselburgh. And her husband had gone to sea, which in the 18th century was pretty much code for he's gone and he's never coming back. So she's alone, she's desperate for work, and she ends up taking a job at a local inn. It's there that she starts a relationship with the innkeeper's son, and, you guessed it, she soon becomes pregnant. And this is where everything starts to go terribly wrong.
Now, to really get what happens next, you have to understand the law at the time. There was this thing called the Concealment of Pregnancy Act, and it was unbelievably harsh. It was basically a legal trap for women in Maggie's exact situation. Here's the kicker. If a woman hid her pregnancy and then the baby died for any reason at all, the law just automatically assumed she was guilty of murder. That's it. No other proof needed. So, with this horrible law hanging over her head, Maggie's situation just turns into a complete nightmare. Her baby is born way too early and tragically dies just a little while after birth. Panicked and desperate, she tries to hide the tiny body near the banks of the River Tweed, but of course, it was discovered. And just like that, Maggie was arrested, tried by the Lords of Justiciary, and convicted. The sentence was death by hanging. So we fast forward to September 2nd, 1724. It's the day of her execution, and the Grassmarket is absolutely packed with people. You have to remember, public hangings were a grim kind of spectacle back then, kind of like the Netflix of the 1700s, if you can imagine. It felt like the entire city had come out to watch the final act of Maggie Dickson's life. And the procedure, well, it was followed perfectly. Maggie climbs a ladder, the noose is put around her neck, and then the ladder is turned over, leaving her to hang. After what they considered the right amount of time had passed, an official surgeon comes forward, he checks for a pulse, and he doesn't find one. He pronounces her legally, officially, and completely dead. As far as everyone was concerned, the sentence had been carried out. Now, her family had this one big fear. See, Edinburgh's medical schools were always desperate for bodies to dissect. And these grave robbers, they were called resurrection men, would often just snatch the bodies of people who'd just been executed. To make sure that didn't happen, her family moved fast. They put her into a simple wooden coffin, nailed the lid shut, and started the long journey back to her hometown of Musselburgh to give her a proper burial. They're about 6 miles down the road when the whole grieving party decides to stop at an inn for a drink. As they're sitting inside, mourning, a sound comes from the cart they'd left outside. At first, it's really faint, easy to just brush off. Just a soft little thumping noise. They probably tried to ignore it. Nerves, the cart rattling on the road, whatever. But then it happens again, and it's clearer this time. A screeping sound, a sound that was definitely coming from inside the coffin. I imagine confusion quickly turned into this cold, creeping fear. And then, an undeniable thud. The knocking was real. There was no mistaking it. Terrified, they realized they had no choice. They had to open the box. I mean, can you even imagine that moment, prying the lid off that coffin? Because there she was, sitting up, alive, a bit rumpled, probably really confused, and wondering why on earth it was so dark and cramped. The shock must have been just unbelievable. Maggie's return from the dead didn't just shock her family and friends. It created an absolute migraine for the entire Scottish legal system. The authorities were furious. I mean, they had a dead woman walking around, and they wanted her right back on those gallows. But this is where things get really brilliant and kind of absurd. Her lawyers came up with this amazing legal argument. They pointed out that the court sentence ordered her to be hanged. Okay, well, she was hanged. The sentence was fulfilled. But the law, as it was written, said absolutely nothing about having to remain dead. It was a perfect, beautiful loophole. and legally they couldn't punish her twice for the exact same crime. On top of that, the public was totally on her side. You have to remember, this was a deeply superstitious time. People didn't see her survival as a fluke. They saw it as divine intervention, an act of God. And who were the courts to argue with the Almighty? So, faced with this airtight legal loophole and massive public pressure, the authorities had to back down. Maggie was free to go. Her second life was, if you can believe it, even stranger than her first. Officially, legally, she was considered dead, a walking ghost. Her marriage had been dissolved by her death, which meant she actually had to remarry her own husband. She became a local legend, Half-Hangit Maggie. And for the rest of her life, for the next 40 years, she wore a scarf or a neckerchief to hide the rope marks, and she fasted every single Wednesday, the day of her execution. When Maggie finally did die, for real this time, in 1765, she had outlived the judges who sentenced her, the hangman who executed her, and pretty much everyone who gathered to watch her die. But her totally bizarre story left behind this incredible permanent legacy. So here it is, the most incredible part of her legacy. Because of what happened to Maggie Dickson, the Scottish courts officially changed the wording of all future death sentences. They added 3 crucial words: until dead. They closed the Maggie Dickson loophole for good, making sure that no one could ever again cheat the gallows on a technicality. Maggie's story just leaves us with this fascinating question, doesn't it? She's this amazing reminder that sometimes history isn't about grand plans, but about these narrow escapes and absurd loopholes, all centered on the stubborn refusal of the human spirit to just give up, even when the lid is nailed shut. It really makes you wonder, what happens when the rigid black and white lines of the law run smack into something that just shouldn't be possible?